Welcome to the Cris Collinsworth podcast featuring and starring Richard Sherman. And we're presented by our good friends at DraftKings and DraftKings Sportsbook app, where for the second straight week, all you have to do is sign up with promo code PFF for a chance to bet $1 to win $100 when any team makes a three-pointer this week. So basically, they're giving you $100. Go download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and get your money right now. Today, we just have a great episode with Buffalo Bills general manager Brandon Beane. He's got a few well-deserved bones to pick with PFF. And we talked about Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs and the way the new salary cap's going to impact these veteran players, a lot of different stuff. But I also took a few well-deserved shots for my lack of digital skills. So I'm going to go ahead and play the introduction that I tried to play during the podcast. This coming from Mike Renner from PFF, naming Brandon Beane as PFF's Executive of the Year.
It's postseason awards season, and to me, there's no more obvious postseason award than Executive of the Year, and it is Brandon Beane of the Buffalo Bills. The job he has done in rebuilding this roster into a legit Super Bowl contender in the AFC is nothing short of incredible. And everyone likes to glorify the draft and draft picks. And yes, he knocked it out of the park with Josh Allen and his improvement this year. But what Beane did in terms of building through free agency, guys that anyone could have signed, is nothing short of impressive, because guys like Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, John Brown, Cole Beasley, these guys who, Darrell Williams at tackle this year, playing out of his mind, they have built this roster through guys anyone else could have signed. Anyone could have had these guys and they could have played well for you, but Brandon Beane recognized the talent, recognized that they'd fit well in his scheme, and all these guys are playing exceptionally well. A lot of these impact players that they got here on Buffalo were not drafted by them, were drafted by other teams. Brandon Beane saw that.
All right, guys, here we go. We've got the great Richard Sherman on, as always, and now we have PFF's Executive of the Year. And I don't know what better way to do this, because PFF needs to make a little come from behind love here for Brandon Beane.
That's pretty good. More than I deserve. It's funny, PFF, all the back and forth we've had over the years with where Josh Allen was selected and how Josh Allen has performed. So I appreciate that, Cris.
Oh my gosh, Richard, this thing has started from way back when, right? This is draft day. And Josh was, in college, he had a little work to do on his accuracy. He had to get better at that part of his game. And his first couple of years in the league left a little to be desired in that part of his game. And then this year, he comes out and just puts on a show. I mean, I don't know if he learned how to check the ball down. I don't know exactly what happened, but he was their running game. He was their passing game. He set all the Buffalo Bills records over Jim Kelly and all the great quarterbacks that had been there. And now Brandon is PFF Executive of the Year. We've been sucking up a lot this year, a lot.
You got some making up to do.
Oh, yeah, we do. I know. I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, he's grown, exponentially each year. And I remember I used to watch the tape, and, because we didn't play him very often. And I hadn't played him at all until this year. And so, you hear the criticism, you hear all the inaccuracy, the this, the that. He's a running guy. And then you turn on the tape this year. This is the only year I played him. So this is the only year I studied him. And you see he's slinging the ball around the yard. He's hitting them on the run. He's creating extra space. He's moving the pocket. His O-line is giving him protection. They're max protecting him. And he's hitting people with dimes, bombs, underneath, over. And then Diggs is working with him. Diggs is extending plays like he knows how. Like, even when he's covered, he says bang and adjust. And then him and Josh are on the same page. And it was really cool to see. And then we played him, and he was doing everything. He wasn't just tucking it and running. He was scrambling to create more time for his receivers to get open. And that's the difference between what he was doing this year and what he had done in the past, because in the past he just tucks it, puts his head down, gets the yards that he needs. Now he's doing what A-Rod does, and what we talked about before is creating more time in the pocket, giving his receivers more time and hitting them with dimes. And that's it's been tremendous growth. I thought he had a shot at the MVP, but with the way A-Rod was playing, it was, nobody was getting him.
Hey, Brandon, can you hold up the football though that I signed for you? Can you?
All right, here is the great ball, Chris's signature.
What does it say? What does it say on there?
PFF never had a doubt about your greatness. Love Cris Collinsworth, number one. So, it's a good footrest for me on my floor here, Cris.
There we go. That's exactly where it should be. That's exactly where it should be. Well, hey man, congratulations. Seriously, this is it was an amazing turnaround to go 13-3. Now, for me to remember the Buffalo Bills being great is no big deal because they were great when I was playing against them at the end of the 80s and we played against them in the championship game and all that kind of stuff. But for you, you were in high school at the time?
Yeah, I was in high school.
And what would you have remembered about the Buffalo Bills from those days? Seriously.
Well, the comeback, I remember, I think I was a sophomore, junior in high school, and I was watching that game. I remember we were in a buddy's basement. We were playing ping pong down there, and the game is out of reach. We were watching it for a little while, and we're playing ping pong, goofing around. And next thing you know, the Bills are making it a game against the Oilers. And, you sit there and you find yourself not, I wasn't a Bills fan, but when a team's coming back like that and you feel the momentum, all of a sudden you're like cheering them on. And Kelly hits, BB and Andre Reed and all those. Well, actually, it was
Frank Reich. I was going to say
it was Frank, but Reich's leading them back, and then I think was it Christie that hit the game winner? I think Norwood was gone. I think it was Christie maybe. But
all I know is I missed it. I turned it off. I was watching a college basketball game while the greatest comeback in the history of the NFL was going on. I'd never even crossed my mind to go back and check the score. I never even thought about it.
It's crazy. I grew up a Washington Redskins. I know they're the football team now, but so that's the only other thing they played. They played the Bills in one of the Super Bowls when Mark Rippon was the quarterback. I think they played it in Minneapolis. But other than that, didn't follow the Bills until I got in the league, and you're tracking them, tracking players and things like that. But that's obviously a great run that Marv Levy and Jim Kelly and Bill Polian and those guys put together, and one that's been unmatched 4 straight. I know they lost them all, but to go to 4 straight is pretty darn hard.
Brandon, the only person you have to be concerned taking your job is the guy that's on this podcast, and not me. Richard Sherman is a definite threat to all general managers in the National Football League because he comes hard with his GM opinions. And I can't wait to hear what Richard thinks about the Buffalo Bills and where we're headed in the future here.
Oh, I think they're in a great spot. I mean, shoot, you got big play Trey. They have a great defense. They have a great leader in the middle of their defense. They got a young, explosive defensive line. Got a few of my Stanford guys in there, very underrated guys who make huge impact. On offense, they have a really great offensive line, underrated running backs. Their receiving core, I think, is underrated, and they made huge plays for them down the stretch in the playoffs. And obviously the quarterback, it's paydays coming up, and that changes every dynamic for everybody. When the quarterback's on the rookie deal, it gives you the greatest chance to be successful and to create the strongest roster. But he'll be getting his hundreds of millions soon.
All right, Brandon, I've got one thing for you though, because if you happen to sign Richard this offseason, I'm just saying everything's a possibility. He's talked about many times how he's vacationed in Buffalo and he likes to go through folding tables and dive down. So, but if you were to sign Richard Sherman this offseason, you would have Tre'Davious White, who I think was valedictorian of his class.
Yeah.
And you would have Richard Sherman, who was salutatorian of his class. You would have 2 resident geniuses playing the cornerback position for the Buffalo Bills. And I'm not saying that's what you should do. I'm just throwing this out there.
Well, no doubt. I would be worried about my job. I'm already worried about Trey taking it. So adding Richard in here, they may be second guessing everything I do. Rightfully so, because you definitely there's always some decisions when you sit in this seat that down the line you go, man, if I had to do that again, I would do it a little bit differently. But that's not the way it works. There's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacks as watching you guys play, Richard. Same thing in my seat, as you know, and I'm sure you're one of them. Second guessed probably John Schneider a few times, John Lynch a few times, and wherever else you land this year, you'll probably second guess that GM as well.
Yeah, it's all part of it's just like when you're a GM and you're sitting there and you see a player make a mistake. You're like, why the hell did he do this? And why didn't you just do that? Why didn't you just catch the damn football? Like, all you had to do was catch the damn football. It wasn't a hard job. That's what I got you to do. But I mean, it's just part of I think sports in general. Somebody always has a criticism or an opinion, and you always, the failures that you have are always much louder than the praise. And I think that's what motivates a lot of us in this industry, some way or shape or another, is some criticism that pisses you off, that wakes you up out the bed every day. And it's like, this son of a gun, like, is going to get it today. And I'm going to prove him wrong. And PFF might have been your wake up. They might have been what was pissing you off all the time.
All the time. They've
You're
been
welcome.
yelling at me for years, Richard, at what a shitty job I've done. So to get the executive of the year, I didn't know if somebody paid them off for me or what. But, maybe they felt bad for me.
No, they didn't feel bad. Shoot.
No, we have no heart. Trust me, we have no heart at all. There's zero. Shoot, they used to dog my kid when he was playing at Notre Dame. So believe me, there's no mercy ever shown whatsoever.
Love it.
I do want to go back though, because this was such a fantastic year, and we'll talk more about Josh in a minute. But there are so many moves that you've made over the last couple of years. But probably none better than Stefon Diggs. Other than Tom Brady, it's hard to come up with a free agent sign or trade, I guess in this case, that had a bigger impact on your team. But I had talked to you a little bit before some of the playoff games and the other games we did of your guys this year. Take us through a little bit of the Stefon Diggs trade and exactly what you were thinking going into it.
Yeah, Cris. So that actually started, as I was explaining to you, in the middle of 19 season, as we're approaching the trade deadline. Going into that year, we had added Cole Beasley and John Brown, and we had some early success, but I felt like people were starting to figure out how to play us a little bit, and we still needed another weapon for Josh to throw to. And so we looked at some receivers, and matter of fact, the 49ers got one of them, Emmanuel Sanders from Denver. We were looking at Diggs in Minnesota and Mohamed Sanu and maybe a couple others, but none of them worked out for whatever reason. Either we didn't offer enough, or they wanted to trade to an NFC team like Denver did with Emmanuel to the 49ers. And then with Diggs, we did a lot of recon just in case Minnesota was willing to part ways with him, but they were in the middle of a playoff run themselves and were not willing to part ways. But we did all of our background on him. And after the season, as we're approaching free agency last year, when this went down, Steph put a tweet out there, just, something, I don't even remember what it was, but, about new beginnings or something like that. And so we checked with the Vikings. And at that point, it was a different conversation. It wasn't hell no. It was, we're not shopping him, but we'll, if you really want him, what would it be? And think about it. And so that conversation started maybe around 4:00. We had a couple conversations in between, and around 9:30, 9:45 that night, we got it done. So Richard, it shows you how quick these things can happen. I didn't wake up that morning thinking we were trading for Steph Diggs, but fortunately, we had done all of our background on who he was and, what type of person, what type of practice player he was, how professional he was, anything like that. And not everything had been perfect for Steph in Minnesota. But we felt comfortable that bringing him into our culture, that he would be a fit. And fortunately for us, he was.
And that's awesome. I mean, he he broke every record there is to break. It seemed like, and he was the receiver that I think you guys needed. True number one, made a lot of huge plays, and I think he's a bit misunderstood. I think that's the frustrating thing in this league sometimes, is that people can take clips. Oh, a sideline. Oh, he's getting upset. It's like it's the guy that's not getting upset that should concern you. The guy that's getting their ass kicked in a ball game and not getting frustrated and not showing any energy. There's different ways to skin a cat, but I think at the end of the day, he's a hell of a competitor, and he's a guy that you want on your team and that'll fight, tooth and nail to the end of the game for a win. And I think you guys made the right move. But that's crazy. I didn't realize how much that went into it. Like his tweet affected the whole decision. You know what I mean? Affected who would have ever known that? I didn't ever think that. I mean, obviously, guys tweet and things like that have an effect in positive or negative, but that's crazy that it kind of started the dominoes.
It's crazy that social media, because you're right. Without social media, does that move happen? And some of the other things that we see going out in the landscape of the world these days with various players. But no, I mean, I do. The one other thing that you got me thinking about when you reiterated what I said about being competitive was what I kept hearing being described was like, this guy practices harder than anybody. He raises everybody's level. And the guy we had in Carolina, Steve Smith, was the same way. Obviously, Steve was an emotional player, sometimes maybe misunderstood. But the one thing I never saw was anybody in Carolina ever practice harder than him. And that was a great thing. Adding Steph this year was he raised the tenacity. And talking to Trey White, like him and Trey White, the whole training camp, like pointed each other out in one-on-ones, like you versus me. You're not going against anybody else, and I'm not going against anybody else. And it was great camaraderie, yet great competitive. The whole DBs versus receivers. I mean, there was a lot of people down there watching that drill. I'm talking about end of the season, because those guys are just kind of raising the level of practice, which makes us all better.
Right. When it becomes like that, that's when it's championship culture, because then as everybody says, practice is harder than the games, because those guys know you best. Those guys know your every move. You gotta freaking adjust on the fly. You gotta find a way to beat a guy who knows everything about you. And then when you get into playoff football, it's the same thing, but it's like, hey, I have some tricks in my bag. I have things that I've been working on because I've been going against the best guy I could be going against every damn day, and he knows my shit. So once I get to this point, I'm over here, and I could see it. I could see it when we played him. I could see how Stefon had evolved in his release package, his sales, his ability to continue a play when he's covered. And in the same with Trey, I think he got better this year. Obviously everybody looks at the interception numbers and like, oh, he didn't have as many interceptions, but interceptions are like opportunity. Do I get an opportunity at the ball? It's not like you know how many opportunities at the ball you're going to get. But I think he played fantastic, just as well, if not better, than he did the year before. And I think it's because of that competitive environment.
It's a good thing he didn't have me as his social media account manager there. It wouldn't have been, nobody would have ever seen it. So let's go a little bit into the Josh Allen deal. I mean, because people forget that they may remember that you traded up to get him, but what they probably don't remember is that it was a sequence of 2 trades. You guys had 2 number 1 picks, I think 21st and 22nd that year. You made 1 trade up with the Bengals to get to 12, if I've got it right, and another trade up with your other first round pick to get to 7. Now, was that all part of this master plan? And because 2-step processes don't always work, right? I mean, give me a little of the history of that.
Yeah. So I got here right after the draft of 17, and we had Tyrod Taylor here at the time. And so we wanted to assess Tyrod and see where he was. And by middle of training camp, we kind of felt like wasn't sure that Tyrod was going to be that franchise quarterback that we wanted. And so we said, hey, we've got to try to get some assets. So we made some moves, traded Sammy Watkins, traded Ronald Darby, traded Marcel Darius, Reggie Ragland to Kansas City. And what basically I was trying to do was go into that 18 draft with as many draft assets as we can, because you can't predict where you're going to finish. You don't know how many. And that year we snuck into the playoffs at 9-7, and then we had the Chiefs' first round pick, and they made the playoffs that year. So we finished after the 17 season going into that draft with the 21st and 22nd pick, and you're like, all right, how are we going to get one of these top guys? And so as we're going through that spring process of working these rookie quarterbacks out and getting to know them, made the move. We had Cordy Glenn, and so we used him to go from 21 to 12 with the Bengals, and was just trying to get up into the top, as close to the top 10 or into the top 10 by the time draft day got here, and then decide where we wanted to go to get Josh Allen. And so it works out. And when draft day got there, we pretty much figured out that Baker was going to Cleveland. The Giants were not going to take one, even though it was late in Eli's career. They went with Barkley, and then Darnold goes to the Jets, and so Cleveland had the next pick. Tried to make a trade there, but they wanted future ones. Didn't want to do that. And then I worked a deal out with John Elway at 5, but John, right before the draft started, Cris, to go up from 12 to 5. But John told me, he said, "Listen, Brandon, there's a player that if he falls to us, I would keep the pick." And I didn't know who it was, but I knew it wasn't a quarterback. Well, Bradley Chubb falls to him. So as soon as he's on the clock, he calls me and says, "Hey, Brandon, Chubb was the guy we were after." So at the meantime, I've had Joe Shane, my assistant GM, and a couple of guys working other teams. Well, got on with Jason Light, and Jason and I went back and forth. We hung up one time, called him back because Indy was 6 and Ballard was taking Quentin Nelson. He was like, "I'm not moving." And so Jason and I went back and forth, and I traded him both 2s, which was more than the trade chart would say to do, but really wanted Josh. And so that was the final move to go from 12 to 7.
Yeah, he's such a nice young man. I mean, right? He's one of those guys that always has a smile on his face, and has sort of endeared himself, I think, to the community. The whole thing with his grandmother, and then all the donations that were made in his grandmother's name to the local hospital, and it's quite a love affair going on in Buffalo right now between quarterback and the community, the Bills Mafia, if you will. But I don't know if it makes your job any easier or harder, or exactly what it does, because you've got a tough call to make coming up here. You do have the 5th-year option on signing quarterbacks. We've seen a couple of quarterbacks this year now already that have been traded when they were signed early to big money contracts, and Carson Wentz and Jared Goff. So what's your thoughts now moving forward? You got a shortened cap. You probably only have 175 million to work with this year because of what happened with COVID this year. What's your thought going into it this year with Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely we got the update last week that so the cap is going to be 180. It may go 181, 182. I don't know, but it's still a much lesser cap. We were all preparing for 210 to 215 to kind of be the number for this year prior to COVID. And so we definitely have some work to do, but Josh is a guy that we do believe in, and we would, definitely take a look at him later this offseason. Right now we'll focus on our upcoming free agents, plus anybody we'd want to add, and then the draft. And generally, what I've done here is look at guys to extend once we get through the draft, see what our money is like, see how we could structure it to fit not only this year, but the years beyond. And I think one of the things that I'm going to want to look at is what are things looking like for this year? Let's say in May, does it look like we're going to have 75% in the stands, 100% in the stands, and just try and see if we can predict what next year's cap's going to be based on a new TV deal, fans in the stands, just to know how we would structure his deal if we were to do something this year. But we have the 5th-year option. If we can't make it work or we don't have a good clarity on the cap, we pick that up to protect us going into next season.
Yeah, you've got other decisions to make as well. Probably the one that sticks out in my mind a little bit is Matt Milano. He obviously is one of those cover linebackers, Richard, that can make a difference. We've talked about this on the podcast before, to have a guy like that, but he also has probably earned the right to go test free agency a little bit here. But he also has had some injury concerns over the year. I think he played 10 games, something like that for you guys this season. What's your thoughts on Matt?
Yeah, I mean, Matt's a great story. Similar to Richard being a 5th-round pick, Matt was a 5th-round pick, and Matt was a converted safety to linebacker and really worked his way. Didn't start much, was more of just a role player's first year, but going into his second year, really started developing into a matchup linebacker, and has really helped Leslie Frazier with this defense, being able to match up with either a tight end or a back or things like that. He has earned the right to go to free agency, as you said, Cris, and we think that's fair for him to see what his market is. We'd love to have Matt back. You did point it out. I think probably the biggest thing Matt would tell you too is he's been frustrated that he hasn't been able to play 16 games, in a season. And, this year he had another setback for us. So it's figuring that balance out of how to get Matt to be able to play 16 games and what's that worth. But nothing but positive things. We, really appreciate what Matt's done for us. And if things can work out, we'd love to bring him back. But, we'll have to see what this market is. And some teams are going to have more cap space than we do, which could make it easier for them to steal them away from us.
Richard, I was so interested to hear your take, because this is a rare circumstance where you get a general manager on one line and a free agent player on the other line. I don't know officially what you are now, but you're a free agent. I'm tired of debating all this stuff. So Richard's going to be going and playing for somebody else. But on the other side of it, you're having to deal with this $175, $180 million new salary cap. So in a year where maybe you would have gotten your 2-year deal to finish your career, if that's what you're looking to do, maybe this is a year you got to take a 1 year. And would you even want to sign a 2-year deal knowing how much less money is involved this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting for guys, because, like I said, I played 10 years and, made enough money to make a decision, educated decision on it. And, if it's not right, there's no reason for me to go out there and sign and chase anything. I can walk away and wait and see if things get better or go do something else in my life. But I do have a question for Brandon, because I think that it's going to create opportunities for like super teams, quick super, because there are going to be so many high quality players that are cap casualty guys, and you're starting to see it now. You're starting to see guys slowly but surely get cut and, to create more room. And I think you'll continue to see that. What do you see that landscape looking like? And this is a question for Brandon, in the long-term effects of it, because that's what people are saying. People are saying, man, it's going to be a bunch of 1-year deals, but 1-year deals are immediate cap hits. 2-year, 3-year, et cetera, are cap hits that you can kind of manipulate and extend out and kind of play with. What do you see that effect on the cap this year and deals?
Yeah, good question. I do think whether it's a 1-year deal or, like you said, there may be some 2- and 3-year deals, but they're really 1-year deals. It's just so people can spread that money out. And, I do think people, if you look at Tampa, what they did last year, you have to give Jason Licht and Bruce Arians a lot of credit. Once they got Brady, he kind of recruited some guys on his own, and just naturally the presence of Tom Brady is going to do that. And I think they kind of went for it and added some pieces. You get a Fournette, obviously you get a Gronk, and just some of the other pieces that maybe they don't get those if they didn't get Tom Brady, and they got those guys that probably reduce salaries, and so maybe that happens to where a couple of players say, hey, I'll take less for this 1 year, or maybe I'd sign a 2-year, Richard, even though it's really a 1-year deal. I'm not coming back at that number next year. It's a high number it's really just spreading that signing bonus out. But at the end of the day, I still think it will be a lot of 1-year deals, but it may be structured like you're talking about, 2- and 3-year deals. And it does open itself up for 2 or 3 teams like the NBA to get some guys that are out there, didn't get the number they wanted, and just said, you know what, I'll go sign with a contender, see how it goes, and then try and go back to the market next year.
It's all so interesting. People sort of ignore the business side of this game, but it's becoming so much more that teams are winning championships in the off season as much as they're winning them during the course of the season. There's a couple of questions that always come up around your football team. One of the comments that were made after the season was that you guys really feel like you've got to get better running the football. All my guys at PFF, which I know you hang on every word that they're going to say,
Of course.
but they all really believe that it has more to do with the offensive line than it does the running backs. You've got a couple of young running backs in there, and Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, and so there would be a temptation. Oh, we need a good running back. We need to go. The flip side is you can go our offensive line. If we end up better in the offensive line, then our running game is going to be better, as a matter of fact. You really hit on Darrell Williams last year. That was one of the really impressive, I think, free agent signings last season for you. Came out and played very well. What do you think the shape of this offensive line might look like a season from now?
Yeah, I mean, we do have some guys that are up. I mean, we have Mitch Morse back at center. We extended Deion Dawkins at left tackle last year, and Ike Butker played at left guard for us down the stretch and did a nice job. He'll be in the mix. Cody Ford, we lost him midway of the season. He's still rehabbing from a shoulder and a lower ankle injury, but hopefully Cody will be back in the mix. He played his first year at right tackle. Last year he was playing guard because Darrell, we had signed Darrell, and Darrell we were going to rotate him originally in camp, and Darrell just really solidified it over there. So we moved Cody inside. But we'll definitely have Cody back. Darrell's a free agent, you know, similar to Matt Milano. We'll have to see. Darrell's going to, get more than what we paid him last year on the 1-year deal. He's earned that right. And John Feliciano, who we signed 2 years ago from the Raiders, who had kind of been a 5th, 6th lineman for them, wanted a chance to start, came here, started the whole 19 this past year. He tore his pec in camp, missed the first half of the season, and then played for us down the stretch. He's a free agent as well. So we'll have, we got some pieces, Cris, that we'll have to see if we can get back. If not, to your point, it's very important for us to protect Josh Allen first and foremost, and secondly, try and get that run game going.
Yeah, and Josh became a big part of your run game as the season went along. The one thing, it's interesting to me when people go and become more accurate as a passer. We talked to Josh a lot about he changes mechanics. I mean, I think it was Jordan Palmer. He was with Jordan Palmer, right?
Yeah.
Didn't he do some stuff with him?
Yeah.
Are there guys out there now that have that ability? In other words, can teams now look to find the Josh Allen body type, right, as we go forward, knowing that these guys can retrain their mechanics and we can make them better and all that sort of stuff? Because Josh clearly now is a different player than the one that came in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look at a lot of factors. What is this? It's like when you draft a player, sign a player, is he at his ceiling, or what is it? And then, in Josh's case, Josh didn't grow up going to all these 7-on-7 passing academies or these quarterback camps, or some of these guys are starting this in 5th, 6th, 7th grade. And Josh played all sports, worked on a farm, small high school, no offers, goes to a junior college, tried to still play at Fresno. They didn't want him coming out of high school. They didn't want him from the junior college. Finally gets an offer from Craig Bowl at Wyoming, goes there. And if he doesn't get that offer from Craig Bowl, we probably don't know about Josh Allen in the NFL. We probably don't see him. And so what that told me in watching him is this guy hasn't had the high-end coaching that some of these guys get even in high school, and then obviously going to some of these major universities and playing. So felt like there was a lot of room to work with. Now, does he have the makeup? Does he have the DNA that he wants to be great at his craft? Look at Richard's career, how Richard didn't just naturally come in as a first-round pick and light it up. He worked his butt off and every year was better at his craft. And I think that's what we saw in Josh, is a guy who knows he's got a lot of untapped talent. And every person you talked about him says this kid works, he wants it, he's a competitor, he's a leader, and you felt that presence about him. And I give him a lot of the credit. Every offseason, he has gone and worked with Jordan Palmer, and he's not, running to, Mexico or to all these resorts. And, this guy wants to work, and I think he gets the most credit obviously Jordan's helped out. Brian Dable's done a great job. Ken Dorsey, who's been our quarterback coach the last couple of years. All those guys get a lot of credit for Josh's progress from a rookie to 19 was better. He went from 52% to 58%. And then this year, right at 70. And I think Josh gets the most credit, but there's a lot of hands on this.
Richard was the same way. He played wide receiver and then converted. So it's interesting that how guys like you can find, okay, who's not there yet, right? I mean, Richard, talk about that. How much different were you as a cornerback 2 or 3 years in the league with the coaching and the training you got than what came out of Stanford?
Oh, I was tons. I mean, it's night and day. And it was in college. It's sometimes it's everything Brandon talked about. It's coaching, it's culture, it's experience. And a lot of my college career, I played receiver for the first 3, and then redshirted my junior year, and then played corner. But the first couple of years, they told me to play off. And when you're 6'3", trying to play off coverage, consistently, it's just putting you behind the 8 ball. Like, you can find a way to make plays, you can find a way to understand routes and guess right, and be where you need to be. But it's my comfort zone was in press. And if your coach is literally telling you not to press, it's not going to be your best tape. And luckily, Seattle was able to see the limited reps that I had when I had press coverage, and I was able to, show my talent. And then I got to Seattle, and they said, I don't want you to do anything but press. Press everything. Press every single opportunity you get. And when you don't, but to the sideline, open up and read it like you read it. Because I wasn't as comfortable pedaling, because I always felt like my wrong foot was in the ground. And so when I got to the league, they allowed me butt to sideline. And so I can always have my foot in the ground. My foot is always in the ground. I feel like I always got to read the quarterback. I got to feel for the routes. I can see the whole field. So it really changed my game. And they just allowed me to do everything I could, even my stance. When I first got there, I used to have this super crouched low stance, because in college, they're like, get low, make sure you're low. And I got to Seattle, and Pete came up to me. He was like, stand in a stance you can stand in for 2 hours. And I was like, well, I can't stand this low for 2 hours. So I'm going to stand pretty upright, And when I got in that stance, he was like, that's your stance. Now go cover. And it just changed. It's the small details like that where nobody even thinks, like, maybe this guy shouldn't be that low in a stance. Maybe that's not when you're 6'3". Maybe you don't need to be in a stance of a guy who's 5'8", 5'9", And small things like that really made a huge difference in how comfortable I was and how consistent I was play in and play out. And it really allowed my talents to shine. Now, Brandon, who is somebody on the team now that nobody really knows about that you think is going to be a superstar?
I don't know somebody that's going to be a superstar, but a guy that plays your position, Dane Jackson, who was a 7th round kid out of Pittsburgh, due to Josh Norman had a hamstring a little bit. Levi Wallace had a couple of injuries, and then they missed games for like close contacts with COVID. We started him on the practice squad early in the year, and then brought him up. And every game he played, he had 1 or 2 interceptions, I don't remember, but every game he played, his instincts are very good. Nobody's got to, your instincts are very high. I'm not comparing him there, but he doesn't have all the measurables. He's got some height. He's got some straight line, but not necessarily stop, start, quick, quicker than fast or anything like that. But he's a young man that, we believe will be able to compete to start next year. We're obviously going to bring in competition for him, but he's a guy we got high hopes for as a young player that showed us it wasn't too big for him. And he's got some guys, as they just got that natural feel for the game. You can coach guys all day long. You put them out there, and some guys just feel routes or can read that quarterback. And he showed some things in I think we got him in about 5 games this year.
Wow.
Hey, Brandon, one of the things that I find interesting with your team, and obviously every team now has to begin looking at really hard choices, right? Potentially this $220 million cap is going to be considerably less. And I've been reading some articles about your team and all that. It's like everybody seems to be speculating, because you've got to do something with high priced players. You can't just take a bunch of low priced rookies and do anything with it. The Jerry Hughes of the world, the Mario Addison, who got big deals, that Do you guys need another cornerback and all the different things? How hard is this process right now? Because you truly have to go, these are guys that helped get us to the championship game against Kansas City. And now I've got to start looking at, do I have to get rid of some of these guys?
Yeah, it's frustrating, and I'm sure it's frustrating for players too. But as we went through this, we're at 185, 186 million, somewhere in there, and so in a normal year, we would be in great spot to pay up to the 210 cap. Not that we would spend it all, or 215, whatever it was going to be. So a year ago, we had a great plan in place for being able to continue to ascend this past season and add talent. And so, to your point, Cris, now we got to relook at it. And guys that helped us get to this championship game may not be able to be on our team going forward, that a year ago we had plans to have. And so we're definitely going to have to look at it. We're going to look at, what guys do we just have to outright cut? Are there some guys that we can maybe reduce their salary a little bit? And maybe it's a reduction to where they can earn some of it back. I've done those before. You take, a couple million off, but you say, hey, you can earn $1 million of it back by play time or another incentive. So we're going to have to try and be creative. Maybe there's a guy or two that we can restructure their deal, push a little money down. So we're going to look at all avenues to try and not lose too many players and still add stuff. And then obviously the draft is going to be very important, not only for us, but a lot of teams this year, finding that cheap labor and not missing on those picks.
Yeah, it's also interesting that once again you guys have escaped without losing one of your coordinators. I thought for sure you were going to lose one of them, right? A lot of rumors about Dable going to the Chargers, Leslie with Houston. There were just, but Richard, one of the things I found really interesting was that Brandon and his staff helped those guys get ready for the interviews in season with these other teams that were trying to steal their coordinators. Talk about that process just a little bit, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a and I want to actually talk about this, but it's to me, it's really tough to ask these guys. This is a dream job for Brian Dable or Leslie Frazier or whoever for a head, just like it was a dream job for me to get in the seat I'm in. And as much as we don't want to lose those guys, we still want to root for their success. And so what I wanted those guys to be able to do was focus on the games, whether it was the Colts week one, because Dable had 3 or 4 interviews after that game, or Leslie had an interview after the Baltimore game with Houston, is try and give them as many nuggets about that team they were interviewing with so that they could focus on the game that we're trying to win to advance to the playoffs. Because to me, it's an unfair process. I know there's a lot of opinions out there, but personally, I would love to see the hiring backed up so that, you're trying to win this game. You work all year, May, June, July, August, all this time. And now you're having guys have to think in the back of their head, I don't want to lose this opportunity with Houston. If I'm Leslie Frazier, I want to make sure I'm ready for that interview, yet I got to get ready for the Baltimore Ravens and stop Lamar Jackson. And so I really hope the league will continue to look at moving this thing back to whether it's after the championship games or after the Super Bowl. I know that's a long time, but I'm at least going to try and ask for them to look for it after that so that these guys don't have to worry about it. Because the other part of that is sometimes guys that lose in the game get the head coaching job, and the guys that win don't, because teams get tired of waiting. And I don't think that's fair. I mean, you look at some of the guys, Todd Bowles, Byron Leftwich, some of the guys in that made it all the way to the Super Bowl, Eric Bieniemy, like those guys might have played too long to get a head coaching job. And I don't think that's fair either. So it's definitely a subject that I hope the league will really take into consideration this year, because Leslie Frazier, he deserves a head coaching job. Brian does too, but we really thought Leslie was, when we lost that game, Houston, that job was still available. And it sounded like he was the right man for the job. And I was very surprised. we're glad to have him back, but I was disappointed for him personally that he didn't get that. And the same thing for Brian. I think we just won too many games. Some of those jobs that Brian interviewed for, they were filled before our season ended.
It can be just so tough and so unfair. A couple of guys just that I wanted to bring up for a minute here. Cole Beasley at the end of the year, and this kind of got downplayed a little bit, but his production wasn't quite maybe what it had been earlier in the season. He was playing on a at least partially broken fibula. Is that right?
Yeah, he had a. I'm obviously not a doctor here, but he had a crack right outside of his knee area there, attached to his fibula, and it's a non-weight bearing type thing, but it's still a painful deal, and it happened in that New England game at the very end of the Monday Night Football game, and so he missed the last game. It's probably a 3-week injury that he played with a little, 12 days later, and a minimum of 3 weeks that he played in that Colts game. And we really didn't feel like he was going to be able to go until very late in that week. You just saw the determination on Cole's face. And I don't know very many guys that would have played with that injury.
Yeah. And for me, finally, just tell me about the quarterback class of this year. I'm going to say it's safe to assume you're not drafting a quarterback in the first 4 picks. So tell me about this class. Does this have a chance to be one of those epic classes of quarterbacks? Because we're starting to hear more and more that maybe this is a group that goes 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's a quarterback league. So if you're up there, you only get to stay up there so long if you're picking in the top 5, because if you're picking in the top 5 more than 2 years in a row, somebody else is going to be making those picks probably. You don't keep your job, but so I do think that's part of the pressure, Cris, is if I'm picking in the top 5 or 10 and I don't have my franchise quarterback, am I going to get a shot to get one? And so you kind of feel like I'm going to take my swing if it's one of these 2 guys or one of these 3 guys. But Trevor Lawrence has obviously been talked about since a freshman, and what he did at Clemson. I saw him live several times, and he's been tabbed for a couple of seasons now as the first round, the first overall pick in this draft. And then after that, I think it's kind of looks like some teams may favor this player or that player, and on tape, it looks like some talented guys. The biggest thing that I would say is, we had our rankings through the fall before we ever met, Josh and Baker and Sam and Rosen and Lamar and Mason Rudolph and all the guys of that class. We had our rankings in the fall, but those rankings changed as we met them. We met Baker and Josh and Mason at the Senior Bowl. And then some of these other guys, we met them through the spring process, and just watching them work out, watching them on the board, watching these guys just in various settings, whether it's around our owners, whether it's around people in our building, just getting that feel for them really swayed the order of how we wanted these guys, because we really care, obviously, that they have the physical talent, but that they also have the intangibles, the leadership, the work habits that I talked about Josh, and giving him credit for what he's done to improve his game.
How much do you think like your time in Carolina affected like how the culture, everything you learn, obviously coming over with Sean McDermott, has affected like both how you evaluate players? Because I'm sure there's some Carolina ties. Obviously, you brought Josh over. But how do you think that's one of the biggest things that, affects your decision-making or affects your process is the things obviously you learn there?
Yeah, I think you learn from good and bad. And like anything, you probably learn more from mistakes than you do from the things that worked. And there's definitely years that in Carolina, Richard, that I thought we were going to be better than we were. And you look back at maybe we signed a couple of free agents that really weren't cultural fits. I mean, I know one year we let some guys walk and we brought in a couple of guys that we paid. And I think there was some frustration in the locker room that, maybe we let some guys go that were really key leaders or people that factored in the culture of the building, and people were upset about that and weren't as keen about who we brought in. So that's one of the lessons that I learned is talent, but you also have to make sure you have the right people and the right leaders to keep your culture strong, because it can, one bad apple, or a couple of guys can really uproot what you built. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and I think Sean and I are on the same page, is we obviously want very talented players, but it's very important for us to have the right fits that fit in this Buffalo community. And it was important when we got here. This is a blue collar, get your hands dirty. And I think that's why Josh fits. Josh grew up on a farm, and he told me that if he wasn't playing sports, that his dad had him out on the farm. So he played every sport he could. And I understood why, but those were just some of the main lessons that I learned, that don't get caught up in always just evaluating the talent, but make sure it fits in the city and in the building of what you're trying to, to build in your team.
And Brandon, just for people who don't understand here, how does it work when you and Sean go in a room and to make a decision? Is there contractually somebody who has the final say? There's inevitably going to be times you guys disagree, right? How does it work? How do you break the tie? Because there's only two of you.
Yeah. Sean and I, we do a great job. Listen, there are things, we set it up here so that, Sean controls the 46 man, the game day. It's a good balance of, there's certain things he needs to be able to take it's now 48. He needs to be able to decide the best 48 for us each game. He knows those opponents better than I do. And that's the right thing. The balance of that is I control the 53, but with that, I don't do any decision on the 53 without his consultation or his input. And, I think that's the best way to do it. And so do Sean and I always agree on everything? No. I mean, I can tell you this, there's players that I've drafted that maybe I would have chose a player over him, but the consensus of either my scouts, one of our coaches, or him, maybe it's 3-1. Maybe I'm the one. I'm going, everyone else says player X is the best fit for us. And I think player Y is. If I feel that everyone else, then I'm going, maybe I don't have the right feel. And the thing that we tell our coaches and our scouts is, once we make a decision, whether it's a free agent we sign, a player we draft, we're doing it in the best interest of the Buffalo Bills. And we're never going to always agree. But once we take this player, we're going to invest everything we got in them. And if you thought it was the wrong move, you need to hope that it was the right move and that you were wrong on the player, and leave no stone unturned, whether you're the coach, whoever, to make sure we've done everything to make it work.
Richard, I wanted to ask, and if this is too personal, just tell me to bug off here. But when a guy like John Lynch, and you talk about your deal, right? And whatever you guys mutually agree, it's probably better to go on. What's that like, especially with a guy like John, who I know has unbelievable respect for you and your career? I would think vice versa. You guys are cut from the same mold. What is that conversation like?
Honestly, it was fantastic. It was businesslike. I think the respect and appreciation and the understanding of both the positions we're both in, and what we were able to accomplish all went into it. When we first started the conversation, when I came to negotiate the deal, it came from a place of mutual respect. It honestly came from a place where we were at the Pac-12 championship game, and Stanford was playing USC, and they freaking lost. And we were just talking ball. We weren't even talking anything, free agency or anything, because I was still with the team. I was just in a boot because I was still, recovering from the Achilles. But we were just talking, how strong of a team they had, and the decisions that he's made, and some of the cool things that have happened for him. when we talk contracts, it's always been, an understanding. I understand both sides of it. I understand as a player what I'm expected to do, the things that I bring to the table. I understand him as a GM, the decisions that he has to make, the constraints that he's under in terms of the cap, in terms of other players' deals coming up, in terms of injury history, in terms of just the future of the franchise. And so when we have those conversations, it's really not a lot of emotion involved in it. It's understanding the numbers, understanding the impact, and at the end of the day, coming to a decision that's in the best interest of for him, for the team, and for me, my future and my family.
Brandon, I've got to think, and we've all seen the Hard Knocks version of those moments when you're in a room with a guy and you've got to tell him, we don't have a deal for you this time. From your standpoint, what's it like?
Yeah, it's tough, and Richard has a great head on his shoulder. You can tell just being able to. It's so hard for people sometimes, even in my chair, to take your emotions out of it and just look at it straight business, and that's the best way to do it. But I always try and say, no matter what, I'm going to be straight up honest with this player, whether it's a player that you say, hey, it's a guy you've had, and all of a sudden you're in late August and he just doesn't seem to have his fastball anymore and it's time to move on. Or at the end of a season, if it's a free agent that may want to be back and you're going, man, I've got a younger guy that's cheaper, that with the with the salary cap that I'm just not going to be able to afford, is shooting them straight of exactly what the deal is. And a player like that, you just say, listen, you've played well, you're going to get a nice contract. We're not going to be able to afford that. And if for some reason you don't get the contract you want or you think you deserve, then come back and see me and let's see if we can work something out, whether it's a 1-year deal to reprove yourself and come back. And we did that a couple of years ago with Jordan Phillips, who signed with the Cardinals this year. Is Jordan was a free agent after the 18 season, and I think he thought he was going to get more than he got. He didn't. Came back, signed a 1-year deal for 4.5, maybe 4.6, and then went and got 9 or 9.5 sacks. And then this past year, Arizona signs him to a 3-year, $30 million deal. And so I think it's even though they might not like what you're saying and maybe they're upset when they walk out, I've found that even when you see them down the road, that they say, hey, at least I appreciate your honesty, even if it wasn't what I wanted to hear at the time.
Brandon, you've been fantastic, man. I really appreciate it. Richard, I know you got a workout that you've got to hit here, and so I don't want to hold either one of you guys up, but we had to get on PFF's Executive of the Year, and it was a bit of a no-brainer choice, Richard, just so you know that. And but Brandon, thank you very much. Congrats on a fantastic season, and we look forward to watching next year.
Awesome. Great to be on with you guys. Nice to meet you, Richard.
Nice to meet you too, Brandon. Thanks for coming on. You've been a great sport.
You got it.